Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Janan Sarwar, and on behalf of ITVusa, I'd like to welcome you to our daily Ramadan show entitled Our Prosperous Ramadan. On this show, we interview inspirational Muslims to learn more about what they do in their professional spheres and their communities and how they're prospering this Ramadan. Today's guest is a special one. Her name is Dr. Suzy Ismail. She is the founding director of Cornerstone, which is a nonprofit, faith-based communication intervention organization that has multiple locations worldwide. She has a Master of Arts in Communication, a Master of Philosophy in Human Services, and a PhD in Human Services, focusing on family studies and investigation strategies. She's an award-winning author with titles including Modern Muslim Marriage, 9 to 5, When Muslim Marriage Fails, and many others. Her specialty is in empowering and educating women, youth, and vulnerable populations. Through delivering international and local workshops and events, she is able to accomplish these goals. She currently lives in Princeton, New Jersey with her husband and 3 children, and in the past has been a visiting professor and currently is a professor of Rutgers University and DeVry, for which she's had the opportunity to research, write, and present. There are so many accomplishments for the sister, but I'd love to go ahead and introduce her and start speaking to her. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Suzy Ismail. How are you?
Good. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I'm so honored to have you here. I shared a little bit. Would you like to share a little bit more about you that I didn't cover or anything about Cornerstone to start us off?
So first of all, Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this show a little bit. I appreciate you taking the time. I just learned that you have 3 of your own children, so I'm sure you've got a lot going on as well. But yeah, you shared a little bit about the work that I do. I am an author, a speaker, and also the founding director of Cornerstone, which is a faith-based relational communication intervention organization, which essentially provides an alternative method for therapeutic interventions. So we help people who are struggling with their family, whether it's marriage problems, problems raising their children, problems, with siblings, problems with community, with friends, problems that traditionally people often feel they don't need mental health help for, but they clearly need some kind of intervention, some kind of guidance for. And we kind of try to fill that gap by providing the interventions in 14 different languages and taking a faith-based approach. So making sure that we're incorporating a spiritual, socio-emotional, psychological wellness rather than just eliminating everything else and focusing on mental health.
This is so important. I'm so grateful for you to share this because in many communities, any type of conversation about socio-emotional wellness, relationships, these issues, a lot of times they're taboo or they're not spoken about. And I love how outspoken you've been on these issues in the speaking that you do. So do you mind sharing more about either, what inspired you to do this and what you think people need to take away from these conversations that you have?
Yeah. So back in 2010, I believe it was, my book came out, When Muslim Marriage Fails, which was a book about divorce and trying to understand what was happening in our communities. It came about because at that time, my doctoral work and my focus was on interpersonal relationships. So it was really more of a study of trying to answer the question of why, rather than, taking like a therapeutic approach to that question of why. And when that book came out, which kind of chronicles the top 5 areas in which we see breakdowns in marriages, inadvertently, I found myself in situations where every workshop I'd give, every talk I'd give about the topic of the book, I'd be met with so many questions following up, people just really struggling and, in a position where they knew that they needed help, but they didn't feel comfortable seeking help from a non-Muslim marriage therapist, for example. And this is 2010. I mean, alhamdulillah, we've come a long way in a decade, but at that time, it was difficult to identify Muslim therapists, Muslim mental health providers. And so there was still also quite a bit of a stigma surrounding seeking counseling. So I found myself kind of in this position of providing guidance from an academic as well as an Islamic standpoint, that was, again, a little bit different maybe than the type of counseling that normally follows the Western paradigm. So, that book came out soon after. I had written two other books afterwards as well. And one of them was Modern Muslim Marriage, Finding Your Right Match or Finding the Right Spouse, something like that. That came out in 2012. And again, I found myself in this position of helping people who were going through struggles. And I realized that we needed something that was more formalized, that could address these issues that people have that they don't necessarily seek counseling for. So we started Cornerstone in 2014 as a response to all of those requests. And we initially began it with just two divisions, just a premarital education and marriage facilitation, helping people get married, understanding, what goes into premarital preparation, particularly from a communication standpoint and an Islamic standpoint. And we also had the marriage division, helping blended families, helping people going through divorce, helping to save marriages that may have been on the brink of divorce. And then little by little, we found that, it wasn't enough just to help in the marriages. People were also struggling with their children. Children were struggling in the dynamics of the family. So then we added our youth division. Then after adding the youth division, we added our anger management and addiction therapy program. Then after that, we added our grief and loss and life changes and geriatric care division. And then in 2016, we added our refugee division, which is actually one of our largest divisions now, where we work with all incoming refugees to provide integration intervention.
MashaAllah, that is so impressive. So to hear that it started from, issues and topics related to marriage to now expanding to family services, refugee resettlement topics, youth, identity, wellness, being able to weather the storms that we have. And I am really curious about your concept of the faith-based approach to this, because, again, a traditional mindset might say, okay, if you have these, turn to Allah and pray, and these situations will go away. But I'm hearing that, sometimes there are actual maybe chemical imbalances or different things. So how are you helping people cope from a faith-based approach? What does that mean?
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, after in 2016, I had traveled to the border of Syria to work with widows and orphans, and just to better understand the emotional trauma that refugees kind of go through. And upon returning, I kind of shifted a lot of my doctoral studies to focus on emotional resilience. What makes someone emotionally resilient? What helps someone through their difficulties and allows them to keep going? And the research, after several years of research, the research actually showed that there's three main areas in which people tend to exhibit emotional resilience if they're able to meet kind of high levels within those three areas. And those three areas are community, faith, and hope. And it kind of made me realize that we really can't heal as individuals or as a community or as families without really looking at these three elements, in addition to understanding the very real diagnoses of depression and anxiety and bipolar disorders. So not neglecting any sphere. So our faith-based approach operates from that perspective that we can't separate, parts of a human being and only, work on a scab that might exist on the knee without better understanding where this scab came from, what informed it, how are you responding to it? So that's kind of the holistic approach that we take.
Absolutely. I hear that we're dynamic individuals. It's holistic approach to and individualized care depending on the situation they're in, their environment, which is the community, the faith that they have. And when you say hope, that means, are these things that we can offer people, like you offering hope, or the hope that they may have within themselves? What does that mean?
So I think that's a good question. I mean, when we look at like community, for example, as one of the pinnacles at Cornerstone, we provide monthly community events. Last month we had a matrimonial matchmaking program. This month, we have a community iftar. Next month we have a program for couples. The month after that, it's a picnic. So we do try to build that sense of community through our organization. In terms of faith, we try to provide a lot of faith-based programs. In terms of hope, we focus on really providing opportunities that really assist people in reconnecting with hope. So, for example, this Ramadan, we provide over 1,000 meals every. So we're actually providing right now. We're doing about 300 to 400 meals per night. So that's more than 1,000 meals a week. We had initially set out to do 1,000 meals a week, but we provide them to the newly resettled refugees and to zakat eligible families. And what we do is we bring a lot of our clients, a lot of individuals that are affiliated with Cornerstone, to help package the meals, to help deliver the meals. And one of the things that a lot of our clients will say is that they've never felt as much hope as when they're in service towards others. So it's like providing opportunities to reconnect people to hope, to seeing the good in this world, and to hopefully allowing them to see the good in themselves and in their lives as well.
That is really beautiful, mashallah. That's really amazing work that you're a part of, and all the people that are working with you. Because yeah, I'm sure there is research behind how we can gain our own happiness through giving and helping others. That is in Islam. It's a portion of our deen,
Mhm.
and being able to do that in a very purposeful and intentional way is just very inspiring. So you know, it actually makes me think of the show that you have on ITVusa that people should be checking out. Do you mind telling more people about what you talk about, these segments that you have, especially as we're coming out of what seems like this long pandemic? And I'd love for you to share about that.
Yeah. So the program this Ramadan is it focuses on trials and tribulations and how we respond to those trials and tribulations and how we can really work on the different aspects of self. So each episode covers a different approach or a different area of difficulty that we may be encountering, and how do we improve ourselves from a spiritual, socio-emotional wellness standpoint in order to get through that difficulty. And we talk about things such as depression, anxiety, understanding the differences between clinical and situational, recognizing that there shouldn't be a stigma attached to talking about these topics, but then also providing solutions and practical applications of different coping mechanisms, including elements from our own deen, such as muraqaba and hudur, mindfulness and grounding techniques from within the Islamic perspective, and applying that to what traditionally has been viewed as like a Western psychological sphere.
That is amazing. I hope people check it out and, can have a chance to see. And you've done other programs as well on ITVusa if people are curious. And you've spoken on so many different topics. MashaAllah, you're a renowned speaker in different spheres. And you even mentioned the work that you've done with refugee women previously when you traveled to Syria, and then currently with the work, related to relief and the resettlement and finding ways to help integrate these individuals into this new land that they may find themselves in. So, of all the things that you have done for yourself, what has offered you the most hope? Do you mind? Do you know if you could reflect on that for us?
Yeah. So I would definitely say much more from a personal realm. Being a mother, being a wife, being a daughter, seeing within my own family dynamics. The ups and downs of family life generally, but also watching my children grow up. They're all three of them are pretty much young adults now, and watching their journeys. College, grad school, first jobs. And being able to see them also like grow side by side as Cornerstone grew. It's definitely a family endeavor. So from a personal standpoint, I would say probably the most rewarding aspect of my day to day is seeing my children being affected by the work that we do. I'm seeing my husband being like a partner and there every step of the way, and recognizing that as much as Cornerstone works to strengthen families within the community, I mean, alhamdulillah, as an organization, it's really helped strengthen my family as well. And I think that's something that's really something to be grateful for, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, that's really nicely stated as well. A recurring theme that I've been interviewing different amazing, inspirational people just like yourself. And one of the things that I remember that has come up is as much of importance it is to be giving back to our communities, we do have to make sure that we're nourishing our own families and ourself. And I think you speak about that as well. I'd love for you to share what those who are listening can do in your concept of self-care and wellness? Because mashallah, I think you embody it. You just shared you have a healthy environment within your own family and within yourself. But what are tips and advice that you have related to that concept of self and self-care?
So, I did a session recently called Beyond Mud Masks, and being able to capture self-care as something different than sometimes when we think of self-care, we think of like, oh, I'm going to do a day at the spa, or I'm going to, I don't know, do something for myself. But
Right.
self-care it's an ever-going, like ongoing process. And I think the best example of that is in our salah, that, 5 times a day, when we literally stop, and drop everything that we're doing and we realign our values, realign our purpose. I truly believe that's probably the greatest form of self-care, being able to remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing rather than getting lost in the what you're doing. Also being able to say no and recognizing that, there are times where you are going to have to draw that line. For example, as much as I love all of my clients that I work with during the month of Ramadan every year, I do take that month off. I do not provide any counseling sessions during that month. Unless there's an emergency, of course. There are times where, I will take 1 or 2, but that's just something that for me, I've always felt like this is my time to realign, to reevaluate, and that's always been important.
Oh, that's really, really helpful and inspiring as well. I love what you said about being able to say no, being able to know what our own limits are, our boundaries. And most importantly, I think, again, maybe you can share a little more about this, but what is that litmus test for us to know whether we are not being able to serve others? And to me, I think it's when you do lose that connection, or when you say your prayers and you're, or missing prayers or things like that. Like those are signs that, and everyone's different, but that could be a simple sign of knowing that, okay, it's important for us to really reevaluate the why. I think that's what you said. It's such an important concept of our intentions. What are our intentions, and what are we doing on this earth? We have a limited time, and our careers and everything, they're very important because we need to make ends meet. We need to care for ourselves and have sustenance. But what are we doing to connect ourselves with our Creator? So I also wanted to turn to you and ask what your views are on this concept of knowing how do you know when it's time to maybe say no, because that's an important topic.
So, subhanAllah, I feel like, sometimes Allah Azza wa Jal gives us reminders. As I was speaking, and, with the fasting, the
Yes, yes,
smoking that occurs. And
yes,
sometimes, honestly, it is about listening to our bodies,
yes.
listening to how we're responding. I had mentioned to you the past week I had been traveling quite a bit. So it was off on the West Coast, then coming back to the East Coast, because even though I don't counsel during Ramadan, I definitely do still give workshops and lectures and programs of that sort. So sometimes it is about being able to just put on the brakes and just say, you know what, my mind, my body, it's telling me to slow down. And this is like a perfect example. When we start choking in the middle of speaking, I feel like it's a good reminder of like, you know what, like slow down a little bit right now at this moment. You're not able to give more than what you can. And being able to say alhamdulillah and knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal will provide, people in your place, and sometimes that's the hardest part of our egos, where we think like, if I don't do this, well, who else is going to do it? But the
Right.
reality is that we are just the vessel. Allah Azza wa Jal will spread his message. Allah Azza wa Jal will bring good to people. And if you are chosen to be that vessel of khair, then alhamdulillah. But don't ever think that you are more than a vessel. And vessels can be replaced. So when you take that time off and take that break, know that inshallah there will be another vessel that can fill that void. And it doesn't always have to be you.
Absolutely. That's really, really impactful, very important. And, I just have one final question for you so that I can let you go and rest from all this travel. But it is, since it is the month of Ramadan and we've been asking everyone to share, what is something that they do special during this month, or what do you love most about Ramadan? We'd love to hear about how you're celebrating.
So definitely, connecting with the family. We have some of our own traditions from ever since the children were little. Certain decorations. We have a little Ramadan tree that, before before it was fashionable to order Ramadan decorations online. When the kids were very young, we had kind of created our own little tree that we always put up every Ramadan. Having iftar together, going to Taraweeh together, the late night diner suhoods. We try to do that on a weekly basis. So really just connecting with family, connecting with our community, making time to really have that connection. That's probably one of the most beautiful aspects in terms of Ramadan, that is, communal rather than just the individual spiritual elements that, of course, are there as well.
Yes, mashallah. This is really inspiring to me to hear you and to recap for everyone what we learned today. I just loved, even just in your answer itself, you're emphasizing the importance of pausing and slowing down and taking, whether it's the breath or the time to go pray or that time to remember Allah, to remember what's important to us, and that it is okay if we have these concerns. We've been through trials and tribulations. Everyone is struggling in some way, and Allah has given that to us. But being able to cope with that, sometimes it is beyond us. It is not, you need some sort of support. And it's really nice to hear that there are organizations like Cornerstone, it being a nonprofit, it's a faith-based organization, and, you can feel that, okay, there is a place where I can go, whether I'm having issues with my own family, I'm concerned about getting married, I'm already within a marriage, and I'm struggling, and I have questions. There are resources, there are places to go. So this was really educational for me. I hope everyone learned something. And if people were to want to know if there's a Cornerstone near them or if there are resources, what else would you like to share, and how can they find you?
So Cornerstone is international. We do provide televisits and phone sessions. We work across state lines and across country lines as well. So we service pretty much, I believe we service about 37 states in the US, and I believe about 14 or 15 different countries. So if you want to connect with someone at Cornerstone, you can always email our office. It's info@cornercounseling.com, or you can visit our website, which is www.cornercounseling.com.
Wonderful. Inshallah. I hope people check that out. I hope people check out your show on ITVusa. It's beautiful. I've learned a lot from it as well. And, thank you again, Jazakallah khair, for taking your time to speak with us today and sharing your story, sharing what you've done and created. And we didn't even get to all the different, mashallah, awards that you won, but I hope people look you up, Dr. Suzy. It was a pleasure meeting you. And if you don't have anything else to say, I'll just thank everyone here for listening. On behalf of ITVusa, again, I'm Janan Sarwar. Thank you for watching. Continue to stay tuned. We're going live every day during Ramadan at 2:30 Eastern to share inspirational stories. Jazakallah khair again, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.